It's almost the 4th of July here in the States, and so that means lots and lots of fireworks. And as I'm watching these fireworks, I was thinking, how cool would it be to make a tutorial in Unity of how to create particle systems that look like fireworks? So in this tutorial, we're going to be making what you see right here. We're going to be making different particle systems using sub-emitters mostly, which is a really cool feature found in Unity. And so we're going to talk about that. The end effect won't look exactly like this because I did put a bloom effect on the camera, but more or less this is what you're going to get. Please also consider following us on Twitter. We love to shout out to all of you and also communicate. Also follow us on Patreon. Any of our patrons at a silver level or higher will get all the files to this. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into Unity. So we're in Unity, and you can see I have a scene, and then a game window, and then the camera. Basically, I changed the clear flags to solid color, so the background is just that dark thing. And then I'll increase this as we work on the particles so that you can see it. Okay, so the first thing, I'm going to right-click here and create a particle system. And you can see that it's created one, but it's in the wrong place. It's on the camera. So instead of trying to, finagle this, let's just go ahead and create another particle system. Right-click, particles. There we go. So much better. And then I can kind of move this around to where I want this. But basically what I'm going to have this be is the rockets that shoot up like this and then kind of explode. So they'll go up and then explode. So we need to edit the different particles of this to make it look like the path of an actual rocket. So over here you see a lot of different options in the particle system. The duration is basically how long it goes before it starts to loop. So every 5 seconds it's going to start the particles over again, kind of in a loop. So the start lifetime, I'm going to change this to 3, so the rockets are going to go up for 3 seconds before they explode. The duration really doesn't matter. Start speed, I'm going to crank this up a lot to about 70. And then in the emissions, I'm going to change this down to probably about 1. So you can see that these are rockets that are just shooting up. So it's like one rocket, another rocket, so on. And that kind of looks like the rocket. So if we can add a trail to that, that's the path we want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create 2 materials to actually assign to this. So the first one, I'm going to create material, call this trail. And then in the shader, I'm going to change it to particles and then additive. And then I'm going to go ahead and create a new one, call this one rocket. There we go. Go ahead and do the same thing, particles additive. And then in the particle system, I'm going to name this rocket, so it's the actual rocket that's going up in the air. And then down under renderer, you'll see it has a material, default particle. We want to assign both of these, so if I add a trail like that, we get another trail material. So I'm going to drag and drop that there, and put the rocket there, and we have 2 different materials being applied. Now, that doesn't look like a rocket that we want, but it's getting along the right lines of thinking here. So I'm going to go to trails and affect this a little bit. So the first thing I'm going to do is going to kind of talk about these things. Die with particles, that means as the particle dies, the trail just disappears. We do want that selected because if you unselect it, it's going to do some strange things with the sub-emitter. So we're going to leave that on as die with parents. The start color take from parents. So if I change the parent start color, the trail changes. I can change that so it's no longer inheriting it. So I have it green. Let's go ahead and zoom in there. So that's green, but the path is still a different color. So if you want that, you can kind of have a different start to the rocket and then a different trail. And so looking over here, width of trail, I'm going to do curve. And I kind of want to start out thick and then go thin, so something like this. And it looks more or less pretty good, so it's looking like a trail coming off of that rocket there. Now I do want the color to be different, so I'm going to go ahead and go here and change this. Now I can create any gradient I want, so I'm going to try maybe an orange color. So there's a first color there, and then a red color like that. And I kind of like what that's looking like. Now I'm going to change this alpha by clicking that little node up there and bring it down to 0. And you can see it kind of fades out now. And I'm going to change this one down a little bit too so it's not so strong. And it's looking pretty good. Now you can play with that to give a more strong effect on the trail or a weaker effect if you want to. Now if I change the actual particle's color, you can see that it's not affecting the trail. So that's pretty good. Now I do want to add a little gravity to make it bend like that, to make it a little bit more realistic. And that's looking great. I like that. So now as I look at this, they're looking pretty good, kind of like the path they're taking, but it's missing some, pizzazz. We want to add some sub-emitters to this to kind of have some sparkling effects. So down in sub-emitters, you can go ahead and enable this. And it says at birth, so as these things are created, it's going to start to emit. And that's what we want. So collision is if they hit, or if at death, when they stop, it would create a new particle system there. But again, we want the birth. You can put any particle system here that you want. So for example, I can take this rocket, duplicate this, and then I can just drag this into the new particle. Yes, I have to parent that. There we go. And now you can see as it goes, it's actually spawning the other one again. So it's kind of cool. It's like going up and then breaking off and then breaking off some more. If I go into the sub-emitter and actually alter this particle, so emissions, crank this up to a lot, so let's say 50. So each time something spawned, it's actually spawned these other things continually as well. So that's kind of a cool effect right there in and of itself, but we can play around with this and actually get a better effect of what we want. So that's kind of cool. So I'm just going to delete that there. Go back down to this sub-emitter, and then it's missing something. So if you hit this little plus, it'll do a default sub-emitter. And you can start to see these little dots that are chasing after that. So the default sub-emitter, here let's unparent this so that you can see what it looks like. It's basically just a single particle that just spawns and sits there. So let's go ahead, go over there, and you can see what that looks like. So there you go. It's just basically a dot. We want that to be sparkles that kind of rotate and come out of the rocket and add that extra little flare. So let's go ahead and go to Photoshop. Here I have something that I was playing around with. I can go ahead and just, delete that. I'm going to make this look really ugly just so that you can see that even if you don't have artistic skills, you can still get your particle system to look pretty good. So I just have a black background as a different layer, and you can use any photo editing software you want. And I can literally just make the ugliest looking piece of garbage that I really want. So something like that for a sparkle. And there, we're pretty good. Now, even with it that ugly, it's still going to work. So I'm going to, clear out that black and save this as a PNG. I'm just going to call it something stupid like sparkles or sparkle. There we go. Go ahead and save that. And then go back to Unity, and there's my sparkle. And so I'm going to create a new material and put that as the actual image for the material. So let's go ahead and do that now. Or I can just put it for the rocket as well. So go to this rocket here, and you can see it's going up. So the sub-emitters we're not seeing, so we're going to change the start size to 5. Here, let me just play around with this. Oh, there we go. So you can kind of see it's going to be this weird star sparkle looking shape is what we're going to add to the sub-emitter. So under sub-emitters, go ahead and drag that material up. And we can call it anything we want, but I'm just going to leave it as rocket for now. So right now, it's basically just creating these little sparkles over and over again. So the first thing I want to do is go ahead and kind of alter the rotation and the emission of this sparkle. So under emission, start speed actually, this is the speed it comes away from the point. So I'm just going to change that to 1. So it's going to kind of actually spit out of the origin. I can do random so it's not so constant, so 0 to 1 or 1 to 2. And I'm kind of liking what that looks like. So it's looking pretty good. Yep. Now I want to add some rotation next. So looking over here, the start rotation will change the rotation, but it won't continually move. So if I do random between two constants, you'll see what that does. Let's go ahead and do negative 360 and 360. And so they're starting at different rotations, but they're not moving. They're just kind of sitting still like that. So rotation over a lifetime is what we want. We want to do random between two constants and do negative 360 to 360. So they will rotate counterclockwise or clockwise, either a whole turn or somewhere in between since it's random. So now as we shoot this up, it's kind of hard to see, but here, let me go ahead and parent this sub-emitter. You're starting to get a better looking effect going on. So I'm going to increase the size quite a bit. So start size, not of the rocket, that's the wrong thing. I want to actually do the sub-emitter. So I'm going to change that back down to 3. Go to the sub-emitter, and start size, I'm going to do something like 5. And you can start to see it. So it's not what we want, but you can start to see that it's affecting this. So I'm going to change this emission to be something like 50. So we have a lot more sparkles coming off this thing. And then change that size back down to like 1 or 2. There we go. And it's actually looking pretty decent that way. The color's horrible, but you're starting to see that you can kind of play around with this and get a pretty good effect. So they're rotating, they're coming out. All right, so let's go ahead and move down here to, color over lifetime. Going to go ahead and do a gradient. I'm going to do an orange one again, so kind of move that down like that. And then a red color again like we did like that. And then I'm going to change the alpha down like that. And you can see that it's starting to look good. And then you can actually create some presets so we can use this over and over and over again like that. And there you go. So now the trail of the rocket is a little too thick to my liking, so I can change the curve in the rocket itself to 0.5, and it makes it a little bit skinnier. I can change the color, so it's like a blue trail or a purple trail. And it's kind of cool looking. Trying to get 2 different colors, I've found usually works well, but you can use them the same color if you want. I like that, where it's like a darker red trail, but the sparks are a little bit lighter. I can even change the alpha of the trail. The stronger the alpha, the more cartoony the rocket's going to look, so kind of alter that to your liking. Now let's go ahead and go back to the sub-emitter and increase the rate over time to 300. And it's a little bit too much, but it's kind of a cool effect, right? So let's go ahead and change that down to 150. And again, a lot of things with particles is just playing around and seeing what works and what doesn't work and see what you like. And sometimes you find these happy accidents. It's kind of like Bob Ross, right? Happy little mistakes that you have. In the color for this, I'm going to do random between 2 colors. So here I can change this to like a blue. And now it's going to be picking either the orange or the blue color as it's being spawned. And so that kind of creates a really cool looking effect. Change that back up to 300. And that's a cool rocket. You can edit it, you can change it, you could do less or more. Just understand the more you have coming out in the emissions, the less efficient your particle system is going to be. Okay. So I'm just going to play around with these colors a little bit, maybe change the color of this rocket. And so now that's not really doing anything because that's the rocket itself, so it's that one particle at the top. So I can decrease the alpha to 0 because it doesn't really even matter. You don't even have to see that particle. Okay. So I'm just going to name this sparkles down here so the sub-emitter is not confusing to us anymore. And then I'm going to do size over lifetime as well. Okay. So that they're not just, the same size. If you go down like this, you can see that it starts skinny and gets fat, or you can kind of move it. For sparkles, I like them to kind of pulse in and out, in and out. So I'm going to kind of create this wave that goes high, then low, but eventually reaches 0. And you're starting to see what that looks like on the sparkles themselves. It's like it gets really fat, then thin, then fat, then thin. So it looks pretty bad so far, but it's going to get better and better. So I'm going to increase the size to 5, and you can kind of see what that would look like. So decrease that to 3 or so, and we'll play around with that. Now if you do random between 2 curves, it's going to pick which curve to go between. So I'm going to move the second curve up and basically do the opposite. So it's always going to kind of be big and then go to small, but there's still going to be that pulsing effect. Okay? And that's looking fine. Now way too big, so change that down to 2 or so, and you can edit that, but that's looking a lot better already. So start lifetime, I can change that. So if I do 5, you can see these sparkles go for a long time, and now they stop because under the max particles, it's only allowing 1,000, so you could change that to like 10,000. But again, you got to be careful because the more particles on screen, the slower it's going to be in your game. But you can kind of play around with that and see what you like. So start size, I can start it at 1. I like to keep it at 1 and then just affect the actual size down there. So I'm not super happy with this yet. Kind of play around with this. Gonna change the start lifetime to 1 again. I'm actually liking that. So maybe 2. Oh, there we go. So just honestly, just play around till you get the effect you like, and never feel bad just iterating and try and get what you want. So now I have 2 of these rockets. If I just clone this, one's going and then the other one is doing its own thing. So that's kind of cool. And I can actually make this rocket a child of that, and let's see what happens there. So as these go up, again, you see that kind of splitting off. And you can change that up to 20. And you can see that that's doing the same thing because the max particles is too low. But you can play around with that again and get a lot of cool effects. So don't feel bad to try and break stuff. Just throw things in, see what happens, see what doesn't happen. So now what I want to do is actually create the explosion. So we have the rockets that are going up, and you understand sub-emitters, and you understand kind of the different parameters that you can play around with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this rocket, and I like the effect. I'm going to just copy it down there. And now I'm going to make this into the explosion. So the first rocket I'm going to leave unchanged, but the second rocket here, I'm going to actually make an explosion. So for the shape, for the emission shape, instead of a cone, so it's going up like this, I'm going to change it to a sphere. So right there. So now it's going to be shooting out in any direction because it's shooting out along the sphere. If I increase the rate over time, you can see what's going on. And again, the max particles is too low for this, so we'd have to play around with that. Okay, so just put an extra 0 there, and you can see that's going to kind of be what it looks like. Now it's not a burst though, it's just kind of flowing forever. It's just flow, 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 flow. Let me just change this camera a little bit so we can see this better. I'm liking what that looks like. Okay. So it just kind of flows like this, which we don't want. We want to just burst. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of play around with the duration, because the duration currently is 5 before it starts to loop again. So I could change this to like 0 so it only does it once. Turned off looping, and then it'll just go boop. But the rate over time is 50 per second, basically. And so we're only getting about 3 to 4 at the very start. I can increase the duration a little bit and watch what happens here. So let's do 0.5. And you can see a little bit bigger burst, but again, it's not just one burst, it's like da-da-da-da-da. So I'm going to change this to 0 and actually add this little component here under emissions called bursts. Okay. Now, when you create a undeath sub-emitter, it actually has to be a burst to work. I could not put a particle that's not burst into this. So I'm going to put burst, add this. Time is when it starts, so I want to burst immediately, so 0. Minimum number of particles, 30. Change that to 75, maximum 150 cycles, and interval really doesn't matter at this point. And so let's go ahead and see what that looks like. So it should start at 0 and spawn either 75 to 150, just like that. And we got the explosion. It's looking really good. So you can kind of play with the colors. You can play with a lot of different things. The trails, especially, the stronger color. So the alpha is kind of low, but if you want to increase the color of the lifetime, that's going to make a big difference. I'm going to create a new preset that's green there, one that's purple, so that we have a lot to kind of pick from, and maybe one that's blue. Let's add that. And let's just try in green and see what that looks like. So let's simulate that. And you can see the trail is green. Now let's change it to purple. Look at that. And you can see the effect that it's a very easy, fast change, just like that. Now the sparkles, same thing, color over lifetime. I can change that. So let's go ahead and do like that purple there. And you can see that it's kind of to a cool effect. Now the all of these kind of have a low alpha, and so you're going to kind of get this soft look. If you want a harder look, just increase that alpha sort of thing. All right, sub-emitters, sparks. Now what's really cool is I could actually create 2 different sparkle colors. So I have this purple one going off here. If I create another sub-emitter and I just kind of cloned that sparkles. So let's drag the second sparkles down there. And now it's going to be doing both. And now it's a lot of noise. That's probably too much for an optimized thing, but just, for sake, I kind of want to show you. Change this start size 3, so the second one's going to be bigger right over time. Change that to 75. So you can start to just play around. Again, I've said that probably a lot in this tutorial, but play around, get something you like. And I'm liking what that is. So 1.5 for start size, simulate that. Now go back down to this burst, and let's parent it to the rocket, and then under the sub-emitter death, put the burst. So as things are going up, they're popping right. Let's zoom out. Let's see what that looks like. So it's going up and popping. Now that's pretty cool. You have a basic firework. Now we can change color. If you want to do different fireworks, I would maybe just clone that rocket, change color, clone the rocket, change color. I'm going to change the start lifetime so that the explosion's not so big. Start speed is 100, so make it, explode faster or slower or random. Start life is 0.5 would be a really small one. The rockets that shoot up, let's go ahead and change this to start lifetime. Let's make this random between two constants, 3 and 5, so they can go lower. Oh, change it to 0. That's weird. So it can go up to 3 seconds or it can go 5 seconds, and you're starting to get that different effect. So I like that as well. That's looking pretty cool. Okay, let's go ahead and zoom back in there. Move that up. Now I'm going to clone this rocket like I was talking about and get some different effects. So I'm liking what that looks like already. So let's change the start speed to 80. So this one's a little bit slower. Random between two constants, maybe 80 and 100. So now it's not just a uniform circle. It's a little bit more realistic looking. That's really cool. Sparkles that come off of it. Let's play around with these settings, see what happens. So gravity modifier, let's change that to 5. Not what I want. I don't know if you can see that, but it's kind of dragging off of the thing. So the sparkles, let's go ahead and change the colors. Let's do this red thing. And you automatically just get a very different looking effect. Gravity modifier, let's crank that. Maybe 4. And that's a cool looking effect as well. So you can change pretty much everything about this. Now I'm just going to copy this again. Let's go sub-emitters. I'm just going to try something out to see what happens. So sparkles, add a new one on death and do a burst here. Now that's way too crazy. And you can start to see the frames lagging. So if I go to the stats, you can see I'm probably getting about 10 frames per second. So don't put that big of, 27 to 11 to 6 frames per second. So don't put too many particles upon the screen at once, otherwise it doesn't look good at all. Without that, it's about 160 to 150 frames per second. So even though I have a lot of particles, it's still doing pretty good. Now, that's pretty much it for the tutorial. So you can edit these things as much as you want, play around with it. For a very different effect, the ones we're getting right now, you're starting to see that they're very soft, right? So if you change the alpha up, it's going to give you a lot more kind of a strong feeling. And I like that a lot more, frankly speaking, having played around with it a lot. The lifetime, the longer the lifetime, the longer it is. Let's talk about this dye with particles, though. If you click this, so it's not dyeing with particles, you see that the trail keeps going and it'll keep on emitting those sparkles until the end, so you kind of get those dots to stay on the screen. I do like the dye with particles, but if you want the different effect with the dots kind of staying like that, you can turn that off. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that this was helpful, and have an awesome day.